I was sitting at my desk when my phone rang, a call that would change everything. My name is David, and I'm about to tell you the story of how my brother stole my invention, claimed it as his own, and filed a patent in his name without my knowledge or permission, and how I proved it was mine and destroyed his lie in front of the entire patent office. My brother Marcus and I grew up in a garage, literally and figuratively. Our father was an engineer who taught us that the greatest things in life were built in small spaces with big ideas and determination. And he taught us that invention wasn't about being the smartest person in the room. It was about being willing to sit in that room the longest. My father died when I was 19. Marcus was 21, and we became each other's family, the people who would carry on what Dad had taught us. 5 years before that phone call, I had an idea that came to me at 2 in the morning while working at my job as an engineer for a mid-sized tech company. It wasn't world-changing, but it was useful, it was clever, and it was entirely mine. A system that would make solar panel installation faster and more efficient. A mounting system with a unique locking mechanism that would reduce installation time by 30%. I spent months developing it, months of nights and weekends, months of sketches and prototypes, months of failing, learning, and trying again, building prototypes in my apartment, testing them, refining them, doing everything right. When I finally had something that worked, I did what I'd always planned to do. I told Marcus, and when I showed him the prototype, his eyes lit up. "This is incredible, David. This could be huge," he said. And I believed him. I believed in his belief in me. I showed him all my designs, all my calculations, all the prototypes and iterations and failures that had led to this success. I told him everything. I trusted him completely. Marcus suggested we do this together. He had business skills, I had technical skills, and it made sense. So we decided to form a company and spent weeks planning it out, researching the solar industry, looking at competitors, sketching out what the business would look like, and Marcus was the one who suggested we file a patent, because if we were going to do this, we needed to protect the intellectual property. We hired a patent attorney named Sarah Chen, who specialized in mechanical patents, and she was thorough. She asked me detailed questions about every aspect of the invention, had me create technical drawings and schematics, documented everything meticulously, and it was through Sarah that I learned the importance of having detailed records, of documenting the creation process, of having proof of ownership, and that documentation would save me. Sarah submitted the patent application in my name. Not in both our names, not in Marcus's name, in my name, because I was the inventor. That was our agreement. I invented it. Marcus would help build the business. I would own the intellectual property, and the patent office gave us a filing date, a confirmation number, an application number. Everything was official. Then nothing happened for a while. Patent applications take time, months, sometimes years. But in the meantime, Marcus and I started working on the business side. We opened a small office. We started reaching out to solar installation companies. We began the process of actually bringing this idea to market. And everything felt perfect for about 8 months, until the first thing that made me uncomfortable happened. Marcus was in a meeting with a potential investor where I was mostly quiet, listening, and the investor asked Marcus a question about the technical aspects of the invention, and Marcus answered it in detail and correctly, but in a way that suggested it was his idea, his invention, his intellectual property. I didn't say anything in the meeting, but after the investor left, I asked Marcus why he presented it like it was his invention, and he said, "Does it really matter? We're partners. We're building this together. Does it matter who invented it technically if we're both making it happen?" And I wanted to believe that. I wanted to believe he was right, that the specific ownership didn't matter as long as we were working toward the same goal, but I was wrong to doubt myself. Fast forward about 4 months later, and that's when I got the phone call from Sarah, our patent attorney. Her voice was different, professional but with an edge of concern underneath. "David, I need to ask you something. Did you file another patent application? Or authorize anyone else to file one on your behalf?" My stomach dropped. "No," I said slowly. "Why?" "Because," Sarah said, The patent office just sent us a notice. They've got another application for a very similar mounting system, almost identical to yours, actually. But it was filed 2 weeks after yours, and it's filed under a different name. What name? I already knew the answer. Marcus Chen, she said, and I remember the sound of my own breathing. I remember the silence in the room. I remember the feeling of the world shifting underneath me. Sarah explained that Marcus had filed his own patent application for essentially the same invention, the same design, the same locking mechanism, everything, almost verbatim from my application, which meant he had access to my documents, and I admitted he did because he was my business partner and had access to everything. And Sarah said this was serious, this was patent infringement, this was intellectual property theft, and we needed to talk about how we're going to respond. Before I did anything legal, before I talked to Sarah about next steps, I confronted Marcus. I drove to his apartment without calling ahead, shaking, angry in a way I'd never been before. Not just professional betrayal, but personal betrayal from the person who was supposed to be my family. He answered the door looking confused, and I told him we needed to talk, that the patent office had notified us that he filed his own patent application for my invention, the exact same invention I invented, the one I showed him in confidence, and I watched Marcus's face change. For just a second, I saw it. I saw the moment he realized he'd been caught, and then he tried to recover and said he didn't know what I was talking about. And I told him the patent office called Sarah. They have a record of his application, filed in his name, 2 weeks after mine. Marcus stood there, and I watched him make a choice. I watched him decide whether to continue lying or to come clean, and he chose to keep lying. Maybe I came up with the same idea independently. Lots of people can have the same ideas, he said. And I responded that not with the exact same specifications, not with the exact same locking mechanism design, not when he had my technical documents and my schematics. And Marcus said, "You don't own this invention, not entirely. I helped develop it. I contributed ideas. That makes it partly mine." And I said, "You didn't contribute any technical ideas. You weren't even here during most of the development. You were working your marketing job while I was building this in my apartment." And Marcus said, "But I had the idea to file the patent. I brought the strategic thinking to this. That's worth something." And I said, "That's worth something, which is why the original agreement was that you'd get a percentage of the profits, but not ownership of the intellectual property, not your name on the patent." And Marcus said, "Well, that's changed. I filed the patent in my name. It's done. And frankly, David, I think I deserve it more than you do." Those words are the ones I'll remember for the rest of my life, and I asked quietly, "Why do you think you deserve it more than me?" And Marcus said, "Because you're never going to do anything with this. You're going to sit in your engineering job and talk about ideas that could have been great. You're going to be safe and comfortable and mediocre. I'm actually going to take this and build something. I'm actually going to make it successful. So really, I'm doing you a favor by taking it off your hands." I stared at him and realized I didn't know this person, the brother I'd trusted my entire life, the person I'd shared my grief with when our father died, the person I'd built a partnership with. I didn't know him at all, or maybe I did, and I'd just been refusing to see it. I left his apartment without saying another word, and did something that would become crucial to everything that followed. I started documenting. I went home and gathered every piece of evidence that proved the invention was mine. I had my original sketches, hundreds of pages of them, all dated, all in my handwriting. I had emails to Marcus where I described the invention before he was involved in the business side. Emails where I asked his opinions on specific technical aspects. Emails that showed I was already far along in the development process, before I ever told him about the business opportunity. I had text messages with coworkers from the company where I worked, showing that I'd mentioned the invention, and even shown some early prototypes. I had emails to the prototype manufacturer dated months before we formed the company, showing that I'd paid for and received prototypes months before Marcus was officially involved. I had technical drawings that I'd created, all time-stamped, all showing the development process. And most importantly, I had Sarah's documentation, the patent application filing that showed every detail of my invention, all submitted in my name, with my technical drawings, my descriptions, my claims. I called Sarah and told her everything, sent her copies of all my documentation, and asked what we should do, and Sarah said this was an interesting situation and explained what happens next. There would be two patent applications for essentially the same invention. Mine was filed first. I had extensive documentation proving I invented it. He had an application filed in his name, but no documentation of the creation process, and the patent office would notice the similarity and do something called an office action, where they'd ask both applicants to clarify the situation. They'd want to know if this was the same invention or two independently created inventions with similar characteristics. I asked what happens next, and Sarah said it becomes an interference case where the patent office has to determine who actually invented it first. And based on what I'd told her and the documentation I had, it would be very clear that I invented it first, and I'd probably win. But here's the thing. Marcus could fight it. He could hire his own attorney. He could try to claim he contributed to the invention. He could try to drag this out in expensive legal proceedings that could take years and cost me a lot of money. And I felt my heart sink. Sarah then told me before we go down that road, she wanted me to gather every single piece of documentation I had, every email, every text, every sketch, every receipt, every timestamp, and create a comprehensive timeline of the invention process and document every conversation I had with Marcus about the invention, and get it all to her. I spent the next 2 weeks doing nothing but documenting, going through my email from the past 5 years, organizing every message about the invention chronologically, creating a timeline that showed month by month my first sketches, initial idea development, prototype failures and successes, refinements and improvements, final design completion. When I told Marcus about the invention, when we formed the business partnership, when the patent application was filed in my name, and when Marcus filed his fraudulent application, the timeline was clear. The invention was mine. It was done months before Marcus was even aware it existed. I also reached out to people from my past, friends who I'd mentioned the invention to, coworkers who'd seen early prototypes, the prototype manufacturer who'd built several versions for me, and got written statements from all of them, sworn statements saying they could testify that I was working on the invention in the summer of that year, and Marcus wasn't involved until months later. By the time I finished, I had a file thick with evidence, hundreds of pages of documentation, a timeline that was airtight, testimonies from multiple people, and the original patent application in my name. Sarah reviewed all of it, and then submitted it to the patent office, including the comprehensive timeline of my invention process. All of my original sketches and designs with dates, correspondence between me and the prototype manufacturer showing I'd commissioned and paid for prototypes months before Marcus was involved. My communications with coworkers and friends mentioning the invention before Marcus knew about it. Testimony from 3 separate people saying they witnessed my development of the invention before Marcus was involved, the original patent application in my name, which had been filed first, and a detailed analysis of Marcus's patent application, pointing out that it used identical language, identical specifications, and identical design elements to my original documentation that Marcus had access to. The submission wasn't a request, it was evidence, it was proof. And Sarah's cover letter was professional but firm. This is intellectual property theft. The invention belongs to David Chen. Marcus Chen had access to David's proprietary documents and copied them without permission. We submitted it on a Friday, and after we submitted everything, there was nothing to do but wait. The patent office acknowledged receipt and said they would begin their investigation, and then silence. Weeks went by. I tried to focus on my day job but couldn't. I kept refreshing my email waiting for news. I kept thinking about Marcus, about whether he was scared, about whether he was planning his next move. A month passed, then 6 weeks, then 2 months, and then finally I got an email from Sarah saying they wanted to interview me, and wanted to interview Marcus, and wanted to see all the original documentation, and they were taking this seriously. The interview happened on a Tuesday afternoon. I drove to the patent office and sat across from an examiner named David Wright, who was professional, serious, and seemed to have read every single page of my submission. He asked me about my timeline, asked me to tell him about June 14th when I made the first sketch, asked me about the moment I realized the locking mechanism could work, asked me about the 3 failed prototypes, asked me about the final design that worked, and then he asked specifically, "When did Marcus Chen first learn about this invention?" And I said, "In March." That's when I showed him the prototype and told him about the idea. We were planning to form a company together. I wanted him involved in the business side, not the technical side, and he asked, "And you showed him all of your technical documentation?" And I admitted yes, because he was going to be my business partner, and I trusted him. The examiner nodded, didn't look surprised, and said, "Mr. Chen, based on what you've submitted, based on the timeline you've provided, and based on the documentation you've gathered, it's very clear to us that you are the inventor of this device. There's no ambiguity here. The evidence is overwhelming." I felt something release inside my chest, and he continued, "However, Marcus Chen has the right to respond to your submission. He has the right to provide his own evidence and his own explanation. We'll be sending him a formal notice asking him to provide documentation supporting his claim that he invented this device independently or that he contributed significantly to its invention." I asked what happens if he doesn't respond, and the examiner said then they decide based on the evidence they have and based on what he's looking at right now, they would award the patent to me and reject his application as derivative. Marcus did respond 2 weeks later. Sarah called me with his submission and said, "It's not good for him." And when I asked what he said, she explained that he claimed he contributed significantly to the invention, that he helped refine the design, that he came up with the locking mechanism concept, and she said, "But his submission doesn't include any documentation to support his claim. No sketches in his handwriting, no emails showing him suggesting design improvements, no prototypes commissioned by him, no communications with prototype manufacturers, nothing." And I said that's a lie, and he wasn't even involved when the locking mechanism was designed. And she said she knows, and his submission doesn't include any documentation to support his claim and actually makes his position worse, because he's making claims but has no proof, while I have overwhelming documentation. So the examiner is going to see this and understand what happened and make a decision that's heavily in my favor. 2 months after Marcus submitted his response, the patent office made their official determination, and Sarah called me at work. "David, the patent office has issued their decision, and it's completely in your favor." I closed my office door and sat down, asked what that means exactly, and Sarah said it means they've determined I am the sole inventor of the mounting system patent. They've rejected Marcus's application as derivative. They've declared that my patent is the original, valid patent, and his application has no merit. And more than that, they've flagged his application as a potential case of intellectual property theft. They've recommended that he face penalties for filing a fraudulent patent application, and they've made a note in the patent office system indicating that Marcus Chen attempted to claim ownership of another person's invention without authorization, which means his application is denied. He can't claim to own this invention, and anyone who looks up his name in the patent system is going to see that he attempted fraudulent patent filing, which damages his reputation in the business world and makes a permanent stain on his professional reputation. I sat there in my office, in my small cubicle where I'd spent years being quiet and not making waves, and I cried. I'd won. The evidence had been so overwhelming that there was no other possible outcome. The patent office had seen through Marcus's lies immediately. They'd understood what happened, and I'd won. 3 days after the patent office made their decision, I sent Marcus a letter. Not an email, an actual physical letter, certified mail, so he had to sign for it. where I informed him that the patent office had awarded the patent exclusively to me. His application had been denied and flagged as derivative and fraudulent. I was terminating our business partnership effective immediately. I was terminating our working relationship effective immediately. I expected him to vacate the office space within 1 week as it was registered in my name, and I was considering pursuing legal action against him for intellectual property theft. But I wasn't done. I also included a personal note that said, "Marcus, I've known you my entire life. I loved you. I trusted you. I showed you something that was incredibly personal and important to me. Something I'd created, something I'd worked for, something I believed in. And you tried to steal it. What bothers me most isn't that you tried to steal my invention. It's that you thought you could get away with it. It's that you thought I wouldn't notice. It's that you thought I was stupid. I'm not stupid. I'm not weak. I'm not someone you can just take advantage of and move on. The patent office has made their decision. My patent stands. Your application is denied. And now, forever, anyone who looks you up will see that you tried to commit intellectual property theft. That's what you get for betraying family. That's what you get for underestimating me. We're done. You and me. As brothers, as business partners, as everything. We're done. Don't contact me again. David." Of course, Marcus told everyone a different version of events. He told our extended family that I'd stolen his idea, that I'd used my engineering skills to claim credit for something he'd invented, that I was power-hungry and wanted to take everything from him. He made himself the victim. He made me the villain, and our aunts and uncles believed him at first. Some of them called me asking what was going on, asking if I'd really done what Marcus said I'd done. I didn't argue. I didn't try to convince them. I just said one thing. Look it up. Check the patent office database. The patent is in my name. His application is denied and flagged as fraudulent. The evidence speaks for itself. And when they looked it up, when they saw the official record, when they understood that this wasn't a he said, she said situation, but an actual government determination that Marcus had lied, their perspective changed. My mother called me crying and said, "I'm so sorry. I believed him. I should have known better. I should have known you would never lie about something like this." And I said, "You didn't know. It's okay. Marcus was convincing. He made himself sound like the victim." And my mother said, "But you're the victim." And I said, "Maybe, but I won. That's what matters." With the patent secured in my name, with Marcus out of the picture, things changed for me professionally. I started getting interest from companies, real interest, companies that wanted to license my technology, companies that wanted to manufacture the mounting system. I quit my job at the engineering firm and started my own company, and within a year I had licensing deals with 2 major solar installation companies. Within 3 years, I had licenses with 5 companies across different regions of the country. The mounting system that Marcus had tried to steal from me became the standard installation method for dozens of solar installation companies across North America. I didn't get rich. I'm not going to stand here and pretend this story made me a millionaire. But I became successful. I became the kind of person who'd invented something that mattered, something that people used, something that made their jobs easier. And that success came from my work, that came from my invention, that came from my dedication, and Marcus got none of it. About 2 years after the patent office decision, I was at an engineering conference giving a talk about intellectual property protection for small inventors, and I was walking from my speaking session to the next panel when I saw Marcus standing by the coffee station, and we looked at each other across this crowded conference room, and I could have walked away, but I didn't. I walked straight toward him and he said, "David, I know you don't want to talk to me, but I need to." And I said, "You need to what? Apologize? Explain? Make excuses?" And Marcus said, "I want to explain. I want you to understand why I did what I did." And I said, "I don't care why you did it. I know why you did it. You did it because you thought I was weak. You did it because you thought you could take advantage of me. You did it because you're not the person I thought you were." And Marcus said, "I'm sorry. David, I'm so sorry. I was desperate. I was failing. I needed a win, and I saw your invention as my way out. But I was wrong. I know I was wrong. And I looked at him, at my brother, at the person who was supposed to be my family, and said, "Your apology doesn't matter, because you weren't just sorry you did something wrong. You were sorry you got caught. If the patent office hadn't caught you, if you'd successfully stolen my invention, you wouldn't be standing here saying you were wrong. You'd be taking credit for my work and moving on with your life. So your apology doesn't mean anything, and I'm done with you." And I walked away and never talked to Marcus again after that conference. I don't know what happened to him. I don't know if he got his life together. I don't know if he found success in other areas, and I don't really care. What I know is that I moved forward, I built my company, I licensed my invention, I continued to be an engineer and an inventor, I continued to do what I loved, and I never had to wonder if someone was going to steal from me again, because I learned an important lesson. Protect your work, document everything, trust, but verify. Even though the patent office had made their decision, even though my patent was awarded to me, the legal battle wasn't over. Marcus hired an attorney, a good attorney, someone who specialized in patent disputes, and he challenged the patent office's decision, appealing it and claiming they made an error, claiming he contributed significantly to the invention and his rights were violated. Sarah called when she got the notice and said, "He's appealing. He's claiming that the patent office made an error in their decision." And I asked what we do, and she said, "We prepare. We gather all the documentation again. We prepare testimony. We prepare for the possibility of a federal court case where a judge will have to decide who actually invented this device." And the thought of it exhausted me. I didn't want to relive all of this. I didn't want to have to prove again that the invention was mine. But I had to. The case went to federal court and went exactly the way Sarah predicted. Marcus's attorney stood up and made the same claims. Marcus contributed to the invention. Marcus came up with key design elements. Marcus deserved credit. And then I stood in the witness box and answered questions about my timeline, about my documentation, about Marcus's involvement, about every detail of the invention process. And I answered each question clearly and honestly. I had the documentation to back up every single claim I made. Marcus's attorney cross-examined me, tried to find holes in my story, tried to suggest that maybe Marcus had contributed more than I was admitting, but the evidence was overwhelming. There was nothing he could do. And then the judge made his decision and said in his official opinion, "The evidence is clear. David Chen invented the mounting system. He documented his invention process extensively. He created sketches, commissioned prototypes, and refined his design, all before Marcus Chen was informed about the invention. Marcus Chen, having had access to David's proprietary documents, filed a patent application that was essentially identical to David's work. This is not a case of independent invention. This is a case of intellectual property theft. The plaintiff's claims are without merit. The defendant's patent is awarded exclusively to David Chen. Marcus Chen's appeal is denied." I remember reading those words. I remember the feeling of vindication, but I also remember feeling exhausted. I'd had to fight for something that should have been obvious. I'd had to prove in front of a federal judge what should have been clear from the beginning. The invention was mine. The legal fees were substantial. Between Sarah's attorney fees and the federal court case, I spent over $60,000 defending my intellectual property. $60,000 that I'd earned from my own work spent to prove that my own work was mine. And it's a cost that many small inventors can't afford. It's a cost that might have forced me to give up if I hadn't been successful enough to pay for it. And I remember thinking, how many inventors have been stolen from and never had the resources to fight back? How many people have had their ideas taken and never had the chance to prove they were the real inventor? But the legal battle still wasn't over. After losing the federal case, Marcus did something unexpected and sued me, claiming that I damaged his reputation by going public with the patent dispute, claiming that my assertion that he'd committed intellectual property theft had harmed his ability to do business, claiming that I owed him money for the damage to his professional reputation, and it was frivolous. It was a nuisance lawsuit designed to harass me and make the legal process even more expensive. And it almost worked. My first instinct was to settle, to pay him money just to make it go away, to stop having to deal with legal battles and lawyers and court dates. But Sarah advised against it, saying, "If you settle, you're telling him that lawsuits work. You're telling him that harassment and threats will get you to pay. Don't do it." So we fought and we won. The judge threw out his lawsuit as frivolous and actually ordered Marcus to pay my legal fees, a rare punishment for making false claims in court, and that was the final blow. That was the moment when Marcus understood he'd lost completely. 3 years after that first phone call from Sarah, all the legal battles were over. I owned the patent, completely, exclusively, without any question or challenge. My company was licensed by 5 major solar installation firms. My invention was being used by thousands of installers across the country, and Marcus had to pay for my legal fees, had a permanent record of attempting to steal intellectual property, had to live with the knowledge that his brother had beaten him in every possible way. I'd won, not just because I had documentation, not just because I had evidence, but because I refused to give up, because I fought for what was mine. After everything that happened with Marcus, after everything I went through, I decided to dedicate myself to something beyond just running my company. I started a nonprofit, a small organization designed to help small inventors and entrepreneurs protect their intellectual property. An organization that does several things. First, it provides free or low-cost legal consultations for inventors who can't afford high attorney fees. Second, it helps inventors understand the patent process, teaches them what they need to document, what evidence they need to gather, how to protect their ideas. Third, it advocates for stronger penalties for intellectual property theft, because right now, someone like Marcus can attempt to steal your invention, get caught, pay some legal fees, and move on, and the consequences aren't severe enough. I've helped hundreds of inventors since starting this organization. I've seen people who invented something incredible, but were stolen from because they didn't know how to protect it. And I've seen people defend their intellectual property successfully because they had the information and resources to do so. Through all of this, through the betrayal, the legal battles, the victory, I've learned several important things. First, trust but verify. You can love people and still protect yourself. You can believe in someone and still keep your intellectual property secure. Second, documentation is everything. If I hadn't kept every sketch, every email, every receipt, I might have lost the patent fight. The evidence saved me. Third, betrayal often comes from people close to you. It's not usually some random person trying to steal your invention. It's someone you know, someone you trust, someone who has access to your work. Fourth, it's worth fighting for what's yours, even when it costs money, even when it's exhausting, even when it would be easier to give up. It's worth fighting. And fifth, success is the best revenge. Better than anger, better than lawsuits, better than anything else is the simple fact that I succeeded, that my invention is being used, that my company is thriving, and Marcus can't claim any of that. He can't take any of that away from me, and that's enough. It's been 5 years since the federal court made their final decision. 5 years since Marcus lost everything and I won. My company is thriving. My invention is licensed to 7 different solar installation companies now. I've patented 3 additional improvements to the original design, all in my name, all protected. I'm comfortable financially. I'm not rich by billionaire standards, but I have enough. I have security. I have the knowledge that I built this myself. And Marcus? I don't know where Marcus is. I don't know what he's doing. I've made a conscious choice not to follow his life, not to keep tabs on him, not to care. He's irrelevant to my story now. He was a betrayer, and I've moved on. My relationship with my mother is good. She understood what happened. She chose to believe me over Marcus. She's proud of what I've accomplished. My extended family has moved on from the drama. Most of them understood that Marcus had done something wrong. Some of them still believe his version of events, but I don't engage with those people. And Marcus, I don't know if he's in contact with my mother. I don't know if they have a relationship. I've made it clear that I won't be in contact with him, and my mother respects that boundary. Here's what I want you to understand about this story. This isn't really a story about intellectual property. It's not really a story about patents and lawyers and federal courts. It's a story about betrayal. It's a story about what happens when someone you trust decides that their ambition matters more than your relationship. It's a story about what happens when family becomes just another person willing to take advantage of you. And it's a story about how you respond to that betrayal. You can respond with anger and hate. You can spend years consumed by rage. You can let the betrayal define you and poison your life. Or you can respond by being smarter, by documenting everything, by protecting yourself, by building something so successful that the betrayer's actions become completely irrelevant to your life. And I chose the second path, and that choice has made all the difference. One specific thing I want to emphasize to anyone who's working on anything, whether it's an invention or a business or a creative project, document everything. Keep a journal of your work. Take screenshots of emails. Save your drafts. Keep receipts. Keep timestamps. Because someday someone might try to take credit for your work. Someone might try to steal from you. Someone might try to claim that they invented it or created it or deserve credit for it, and when that happens, your documentation will save you. The reason I won against Marcus wasn't just because I had the better claim. It's because I had documented everything so meticulously that there was no question about what was true. I didn't have to convince anyone. The evidence convinced them. And that's the power of documentation. The hardest part of this story isn't the legal battles, it's the betrayal. I trusted Marcus completely. I showed him my invention. I included him in my business plan. I believed that we would build something together. And he looked at all of that and decided it was his. And that's the part that hurt. That's the part that still hurts if I'm being honest. Not that he tried to steal from me, but that he felt he needed to, that he didn't believe in me enough or in our partnership enough to work together like we'd agreed, that he thought I was so weak that he could just take what was mine and I wouldn't notice. And when I did notice, when I fought back, he didn't apologize. He lied. He tried to justify it. He tried to make himself the victim. And that's the real betrayal, not the patent application, but the character that the patent application revealed. I'm not angry at Marcus anymore. Anger would require me to still care about him, and I don't. What I am is wise. I'm wise enough to know that betrayal comes from people close to you. I'm wise enough to protect myself while still being open to connection. I'm wise enough to know the difference between trusting people and blindly trusting people. And I have partners in my business now, people I work with, but I also have legal agreements in place, clear documentation about who owns what, clear contracts about intellectual property rights. I trust them, but I protect myself too. And that balance is what allows me to move forward without becoming paranoid or closed off. If you're facing a situation like mine, if someone you love has betrayed you, if someone has taken something from you that wasn't theirs to take, here's what I want you to know. It's not your fault. Betrayal is not something you caused. It's something that was done to you. You have the right to defend yourself. You have the right to fight back. You have the right to use whatever legal tools available to you to prove the truth. And you have the right to walk away from that person, family or not. Some people don't deserve a place in your life. Some people have shown you who they are, believe them, and then build something incredible anyway. My story isn't about winning a legal battle. It's about choosing yourself when someone else tries to diminish you. It's about protecting your work. It's about documenting your journey. It's about refusing to be a victim. And it's about understanding that the best revenge isn't anger or lawsuits or public shaming. The best revenge is success. It's building something that matters. It's creating something valuable. It's becoming a person that others respect and admire. And Marcus can't take that away from me. No one can. And that's the real victory.